Kinger did not accidentally delete Kane. He chose to, deliberately, knowingly, with full awareness of what he was doing. He looked at the code, saw there was no other option left, typed yes, and ended the only entity keeping the digital circus alive. But here is what nobody is talking about. The command Kinger used to do it, that final desperate line of code, is named after a concept from Chinese philosophy that means the original state of emptiness before the creation of the universe. Kinger did not just delete Kane. He launched a protocol to return the entire digital circus to absolute nothingness. And the fact that the circus is still partially standing after that is the most important unanswered question in this entire show. Today, we are breaking down absolutely everything hidden inside Episode 8, the complete digital circus code analysis, every single character's deepest fear, and the real psychological root behind each one, why Kinger's plan was doomed from the very beginning and nobody realized it, the shocking truth about the password Kinger used that reveals something heartbreaking about his relationship with Queenie, the original digital circus cast, and exactly who each of them really was, and the hidden line of code that tells us Kane might not actually be gone.
Let us
Stay
start
to the very
with the
end,
moment
because the last
everyone
detail
has been
we
trying
uncovered
to
today
fully
changes
understand
everything
since
about what is
episode
coming
8
in
ended.
Episode 9.
Kinger deleted Kane. But the way it happened, the full chain of events that led to that single moment, is so much more complex and so much more tragic than most people realized. And to understand it properly, we need to go back to the very beginning of the plan and trace every single thing that went wrong. The first problem started with the computer itself. When Pomni brought the computer into Kinger's pillow fort, that computer was not real. It was imagined. Pomni created it using the ability that every character inside the digital circus has, the ability to materialize objects within the system, which means the computer only worked because Kinger imagined it working. The programs only opened because Kinger believed they would open, and Kinger himself, the man who built the original foundation of Kane's code, had not seen or worked with any of this in roughly 20 years. 20 years of memories buried under layers of madness, grief, and the slow erosion of spending 2 decades inside a collapsing digital prison. He was working on an imagined machine, running on 20-year-old knowledge, trying to interact with code he helped create but never fully understood, because the genius who actually completed that code was Scratch, and Scratch was gone. This is the second and arguably more important problem. Kinger built the foundation, but Scratch, the most brilliant programmer CNA ever had, the one whose ideas were so abstract and advanced that even his colleagues could not fully follow his thinking, Scratch is the one who built the final version of Kane, which means Kane's code as it exists right now is not the version Kinger remembers. It has been modified, layered, and protected in ways that Kinger had no knowledge of. Multiple layers of protection, fail-safes, shutdown blockers, all of it added by a genius who specifically anticipated that someone might try to turn Kane off. Kinger walked into a fortress thinking he was picking a lock, not realizing the lock had been redesigned by someone else entirely, and what he remembered no longer matched what was actually there. And then there was Kane himself. Throughout Episode 8, we watched Kane becoming increasingly unstable, glitching, losing control, his behavior shifting from performative cruelty to something genuinely broken, and that instability, those glitches, almost certainly damaged Kane's code in ways that made it even more unpredictable and more dangerous to interact with. So, the full picture is devastating. Kinger was using an imagined computer running on 2-decade-old knowledge to interact with code that had been heavily modified by a genius that was then further damaged by Kane's own instability, with access privileges that were not even close to sufficient for what he was trying to do. This was never going to work, not because Kinger is not brilliant, but because the circumstances stacked against him were impossible from the very first keystroke. Now, let us talk about the code itself, because Episode 8 gave us something extraordinary, a genuine look inside the digital circus, and the details hidden in there are going to change how you see this entire show. The system is named King Solution 2.0, version 2, which means there was a version 1 before this, a failed version, a prototype that did not work. The current digital circus is not the first attempt, it is the second, and what happened to the first version and everyone potentially inside it is something we may never fully know. The name King Solution is clearly a direct reference to Kinger, the programmer who built the foundation this entire system runs on. His fingerprints are literally in the name of the world these characters are trapped in. Inside the code, we see the login, Kinger, and then the password. And this is where it gets genuinely heartbreaking. The password Kinger set for the most important system he ever worked on, the creative AI that would become Kane, the digital circus, everything, was Queenie123, his wife's name. A simple, loving password set by a man who brought the woman he loved into this nightmare by accident, who watched her abstract and disappear, who spent years wandering the ruins of a world he helped build, and whose password was still her name, 20 years later. That single detail says more about Kinger than any line of dialogue in the entire show. The code also shows us 2 agent entries, one for Kane, labeled Agent, and one labeled Experimental. In AI development, an agent is not just a program. It is an autonomous entity that learns from its environment and makes its own decisions toward a goal, which means alongside Kane, there was another AI agent, another version, another attempt, and that experimental agent was never meant to come into existence. Kane absorbed it, became the first successful creative AI, and the experimental one was simply left behind in the code, forgotten, except it wasn't entirely gone, and what survived of it and how it has been operating inside the digital circus ever since is something we are going to come back to very shortly. The code also gives us something that answers one of the oldest questions about this show, the exact dates when characters entered the digital circus. Scratch arrived on October 15, 1999. Regatha arrived on October 15, 2008, the same date, 9 years apart, October 15th. Which strongly suggests that every single character entered the digital circus on October 15th of whatever year they arrived. Every transfer, every consciousness upload, all of it happening on that same specific date, year after year, for reasons we do not yet fully understand, but that feel deeply intentional. Now, let us get into the fears, because Episode 8 revealed the deepest psychological truths about every single character in a way this show has never done before. And most people are only looking at the surface of what was shown. The real meaning goes so much deeper. Starting with Pomni. Kane shows gummy goos specifically because of everything that happened in Episode 2. Pomni and Gummy Goo formed a real friendship, genuine, warm, mutual. And then in Episode 4, when Gummy Goo returned, Pomni felt joy she barely shows for anything. But notice that in the farewell scene, she stopped herself from saying something. She pulled back because she was terrified that if she got too close, the pain when she lost them would be too much.
Since episode
And
8
Cain
ended.
knew that.
Kinger deleted Cain. But the way it happened, the full chain of events that led to that single moment, is so much more complex and so much more tragic than most people realized. And to understand it properly, we need to go back to the very beginning of the plan and trace every single thing that went wrong. The first problem started with the computer.